What is up, and welcome to TCR Live. We are here to talk about the NFL draft, the Arizona Cardinals pick, talk about what we think of those picks, how they fit with the team, and so on and so forth. But I am joined once again by my good friend Jackie. It's been too long. It's always great to hang out with you, Jackie. How are you?
I'm doing great, Joe. It's been way too long, and I've been very excited to get through this whole draft process and to be here breaking down these picks and, hanging out with everybody in the chat.
Awesome, awesome. So, we're going to get to it and we will, absolutely get into detail, but give me in one sentence how you feel overall after the draft.
I think Monty cooked. I think we hit it out of the park.
Nice, nice. I would concur, but we'll get into the detail of explaining why we think that, get into everything. Real quick, we got some folks in the chat. We're glad to have you here. We got AZ Esports Cards. Thanks for being here. Evening. Thanks for hanging out with us. We got, is it Sid Apple, Side Apple, Sidable? I'm not sure. I'd say Sid Apple. I don't know. But thanks for being here. Let me know how to pronounce that. I'm sure we got some other folks popping in, so we'll say hey to you as you come in. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of start by going pick by pick, talk about what we think about them. And we also have a few video clips from Aaron Van Buren, who recorded some things for us. He wasn't able to be with us, but he got a couple quick recordings. So I'll pop those up here and there as we get to them. We got JP. It's been a long time. How you doing, JP? Hope you're doing well. Good to see you. We got Jacob Williams. What's up? We got Mizaki Felix. What's up, Professor? Not much excited about what's going on here, but we'll get into it. So let's go ahead and I'm going to I've got it kind of I'm going to share my my screen here, and we're going to kind of look at the picks, right, and talk about them a little bit. There we go. And kind of go through it a little bit, and we'll pop in with Aaron Van Buren's his thoughts here and there. So the Arizona Cardinals draft. This is a graphic that the Arizona Cardinals put out themselves. This is the 2025 draft class. We've got Walter Nolan the third in the first round, Will Johnson, cornerback in the second round, Jordan Burch, edge rusher, third round, Cody Simon, inside linebacker, fourth round, Denzel Burke, cornerback in the fifth round, sixth round, offensive lineman, really a guard, Hayden Connor, and in the seventh round, safety, Kitan Crawford. And when we look at, we're going to go through each player and talk about them and look at a little bit of their PFF grades and in where available, their RAS scores. And we're going to talk about how we think they fit with the team and in general talk about them. So let's talk first about Walter Nolan. Jackie, we see his PFF grades really good overall. We've talked about him a lot. He was probably one of the most often mocked players by Cardinals fans in their mock drafts. So it did not come out of left field. This is a very popular pick. What are your thoughts about Walter Nolan, the pick, and how do you think he fits on this defense, and general thoughts about the pick?
Well, general thoughts. I will be quite honest with you, Joe. I wasn't too excited about the pick off the jump, just based off of the character issues that we've kind of heard about, kind of blowing up at practice a bit, and just kind of being like about himself. But he was mocked to us for a reason. He's picked at this where he was picked for a reason. He's very explosive. He's got a great first step. 6.5 sacks last season, 12 tackles for losses. Um, so I after the fact, I let it digest. I'm like, okay, I can live with this. I did actually watch an interview today with him and Paul Calvisi. Um, he seeing him in interviews, he's a little soft spoken, so that's always good. He's not a Shador Sanders, which was the big headline in the draft, so to say. Um, but he's very excited to get in the room. He said, he can't wait to ask questions, especially to the vets like Calais Campbell. He wants to know like what does it take to be in this league, as long as you have, what's the sauce as he put it. So whatever they're doing, he wants to add to his routine. So I'm pretty pumped about it. What hasn't been said about Walter Nolan, explosive guy can, be a game wrecker, disruptor if he, as long as he comes to work, I'm all in.
Yeah, for sure. I'm gonna kind of bring take. It's gonna take me a second to get this, but I'm gonna bring up Aaron Van Buren's thoughts on the Nolan pick. He was so kind as to record a video about this. So I'm going to bring that in. Y'all have to bear with me. There's a little bit of uh, making this all work. Here we go. So getting AVB. Here's Aaron Van Buren's thoughts on the Walter Nolan pick.
So reacting to the Cardinals draft after having been there in person for it, I was very happy with the first round selection of Walter Nolan. Disruptive defensive tackle or interior D lineman, or can be possibly be playing edge. Who knows what Jonathan Gannon is going to do with him? But Jonathan Gannon said he was a disruptor, and I was finally able to get back and watch some highlights after that first night. And man, I'm so excited for him to get into this defensive rotation with Josh Sweat and Calais Campbell, and hopefully Darius Robinson has a great, first true rookie year per se. But couldn't have been a better slam dunk at 16 overall for the Cardinals.
All right. So AVB is a fan, right?
Sure.
Of the pick. So I know, and let me say hey to some folks in the chat. Some folks have commented on this pick, and then I'll kind of get to my thoughts on the Nolan pick as well. While I also bring back up the PFF slide info on him. Okay. So there's a lot of kind of different opinions on him. And, when we look at, let's do this way and put him up there. All right. So there were a lot of different opinions. A lot of people really liked him. Real quick, Jacob, what's up? Yep, thanks for being here. Red Sea Dad, Damon Harris. I think we did had a great draft, except issues maybe wide receiver. Chris Young, even folks. Red Sea saying his least favorite pick was Denzel Burke. We'll talk about him later. Jacob Williams, I can't believe Will is a Cardinal. Talking about the second round pick. Robert Moore, good evening, gents and ladies. Rambo, good evening, everyone. Hope you're doing well, Professor. Now, Mizaki Felix does not mince words. He detests the Walter Nolan pick, and he thinks that he's the next, Robert Kindici. And this has been, going into this has been the comparison people have made if they're concerned about this pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I've also heard people, and in fact, I was tuning into the Redbird Reboot podcast with our, some of our good buddies, Blake Murphy and Pancake Soul is his Twitter handle. So following those two guys, you definitely need to follow them. But they were talking about this. And the other comparison that people have also made is Darnell Dockett. These are both disruptive defensive tackles, both who had, shall we say, some personality quirks. And, with Walter Nolan, the best way to describe it has been maturity issues. It hasn't been the kind of off the field stuff, at least that's been reported, that some other players who
Nothing
fell.
egregious. Yeah.
Right. It's just more maybe some maturity stuff. And so the Darnell Dockett had that too. Darnell Dockett was, and I love him as a Cardinals player, but he was a different cat, right?
The knucklehead, to say the least.
Yeah, a little bit, right? But he was a great player, and there's those kinds of personality quirks, but then and as I know Blake Murphy was talking about this on their podcast with Kim Diche, there were some things about him that were disinterested and in terms of his approach. So I trust that JG and Monty did their homework in the personality side of things, and I just don't think they would have taken him if they were worried about that. Maybe he has some maturity things that needs to work on, perhaps. But they've got him in the room with the right guys, right? So, could it become a situation where that's a problem? Sure. But there's also a really good chance it's not. And there have been other players like this in the past where someone took a chance on them and it ended up not being an issue, so we'll see. But as the player, he's so disruptive, right? And that's really important. But one of the things I love too, in the NFL draft, when you look at interior defensive linemen, there are guys that are just run stoppers, but they don't have any pass rush wiggle. And those guys go in the third round. Sometimes the best go in the second round, but usually third, fourth rounds. And they're solid players, but they don't give you anything pass rush, right? You can get them on day 2 or 3. Then you have guys who are just pass rushers, but not great at stopping the run. They're mediocre at best. And those guys might get into the first round, but they're more likely second and third round, right? When you have a guy who can stop the run and rush the passer and is disruptive on both those areas, that's when you have a top half of the first round kind of defensive lineman. And that's what he is. We talk about him as a disruptive pass rusher, but he was one of the best run defenders in college. You look at his run defense grade of 91.6, right? At Ole Miss, playing some good teams, right? Playing Georgia, playing teams like that. But he was also a good pass rusher. So this is a player who brings both the pass rush and the run stopping, and he's disruptive in both of those. And his player comp for PFF is Milton Williams, a guy that the Cardinals tried to pay $20 million to sign. So instead of, now in retrospect, I think Monty was smart. They had their dollar amount. And with Milton, when they were priced out, they said, okay, we have a plan. We're sticking to our plan. And they ended up getting Walter Nolan in the draft, who seems like he's that kind of player. So I was at first going into it, I wasn't as big on Walter Nolan. There were other players I really liked, but more I looked into him, and when I see the combination of not just being a pass rusher, but I got to help with the run and the pass, I really like the pick. Let me get to some comments. I'll let you respond to that. We've got Grandizer doing what Grandizer does best, help and support the chat. Thank you so much for all that you do. Jacobs Williamson, I don't know if I love his personality, very mild. Let's see him on the field. We got Salty's Gaming. Thanks for being here, my friend. Another content creator. Make sure you're following him. What is up? Go Cardinals. Robert Moore saying, in hindsight, JG hinted what the focus of the draft would be: winning the turnover battle, stopping the run, and adding QB pressure increases the chance of turnovers 100%. Right? We got Russ Carver. Thanks for being here. My only disappointment was that we didn't get Cam Scatteroo. A lot of people love Cam, right? I would have gladly traded a future third-round pick up to the top of the fourth, because the future third is going to be nearly a fourth. Jason Crow, thanks for being here. Hey, Joe, long time no see. Appreciate you hanging out with us. Brian saying, Brian Abdallah saying Nolan was a great pick. I love his hands and quick feet. Saltiest Gaming say, I give the Cards to B+ for a draft. It only would have been better if they addressed the O-line earlier. Yeah, I would have maybe liked a little more of the O-line. We'll talk about that. The guy they did draft. They definitely went defense heavily. I would have liked, and we'll talk about the particular player they took, right? Russ saying, I love that we got a guy I wanted at 16 at 47, though, 2 basically top 10 picks. I'm not worried about Walter Nolan's character. He's what we wanted DeAndre Ayton to be for the Suns. Let's see. We got Thunder. Thanks for being here. JG said he was impressed by Nolan's effort, even after playing 50+ plays. I'm not worried. Chris Young saying, in an interview, he was asked what he was excited about coming into the league. He said he wanted to see if the O-line guys in the NFL were content to get paid, or if they wanted the ball. I like that, right? Jason Williams saying, I trust JG's evaluation, though. They wouldn't draft a dude who doesn't love ball. There's a lot of other Jake Worderly, thanks for being here. Damn, jumped in late. Well, we're glad you're here either way. Dana, one of our resident film analysts, right? Dana does some really good stuff in terms of looking at film. I would prefer to trade down simply because I don't think the drop off to the second round DTs was as big as the value from the top 100 picks. But if we're going to stick, that was the player. Okay. Let's see. See if there's anyone else. Robert saying, when it comes to Nolan, the talent is there. Just he's just young. Take Jalen Carter. He dropped quite a bit until he fell into the Eagles' lap. He's been their dominant player since. We got Paul G. Thanks for being here, my friend. Appreciate you, Paul. AZ Esports Card saying, feels like Nolan has a chance to be Monty's honey badger, the question mark guy in the room with vets and leaders to steer him straight. Here's hoping, right? We got Agent 47. What draft hot take? Okay. This defense will be the best in division by the end of the year. Here's hoping, right? Misaki Felix, I wanted Harmon over Norm all day, every day. I mean, listen, Harmon's a good player. I think he went to the Steelers, so but I'm still kind of excited about Nolan, right? Let's see if there's anyone else. I know there's a lot of comments. Want to try to get everyone at least once. If I miss you, I apologize. Okay. Whew. You want to respond to any of that, Jackie?
I did see that somebody said that about he wanted to see if opposing offensive linemen, are they there for the check or do they love football? Because he said, he's there to play football. So
Mhm.
that's exciting mentality to have, wanting to compete. Um, and the board felt kind of weird. I know Dana said maybe trading back, and I kind of was in the same boat too. In kind of like some mocks that I saw, Kenneth Grant went a little bit lower than I anticipated. He ended up being very highly picked. So I thought maybe you can trade back and you can get a Kenneth Grant or somebody of that value. But ultimately, I'm glad we stick and pick. You if there's a guy on the board that you want, take him.
Yeah. I always want to say stuck and pucked, right? Don't you?
Yeah,
Like
I was
stick
gonna
and
say
pick,
stuck and
stuck
puck.
and puck. Well, let's just make that a thing. They stuck and puck. It's now a new word. It's stuck and puck. We got our good buddy Kyler Burke. This is arguably the best situation for a player with those types of concerns to go into. Calais, Dalvin, and Darius, all hard workers. I completely agree. Right? It's definitely a good situation for him to fall into 100%. All right, so let's move on. So then, we get to the next player, Will Johnson, a player who I thought um like could have been in play in the first round. A lot of people thought that. And if it weren't for the injury concern, right, or the long-term prognosis, because he's not injured, right? He's been injured in the past, and I think it's more questions about is he going to be a guy who even gets to a second contract? That's the question, right? But like the player himself is like elite and was arguably a top 10 to 15 player in the draft, and he keeps falling, and I'm just like, are we going to get him in the second round? Like, and I kept thinking, okay, maybe Monty's going to trade up, but no, like he fell all the way to, and then we got him at 47, and that is a chance I'll take, right? And real quick, let's see what Paul has something about the injury. At the combine, Will Johnson said he had ligament damage in the toe during his interview. The other stuff was knee cartilage damage that got all the news. He had a transplant of cartilage. Interesting. So listen, I'm not that kind of doctor. I'm a PhD doctor, not an MD doctor. So I don't know. And teams, listen, there were teams that were concerned about it enough, but the Cardinals felt good enough about it to take him. But what are your thoughts about Will Johnson?
Well, I'll tell you what, a big reason why I was disappointed with the Walter Nolan pick is because I wanted Will Johnson there at 16. Then that was kind of the general consensus from every analysis that he's going to be top 15 player, maybe he falls to 16 given what the other teams do. So that was my thing is I know this is a good cornerback room, but if you have the opportunity to potentially make it elite, never having to see Sean Murphy Bunting in coverage again, you got to take that. So to not take him in the first round and then he falls all the way to 47, like that is a home run by Monty. But I know like the criticism has been like Monty's a little conservative. He likes to trade back. He doesn't take the guy while he's there. Well, now he did. Like
Yeah.
this is his. It's. I don't necessarily think it's a high risk, high reward, but I wouldn't call it a low risk either. But for the value, you can't pass that up at all because you know he's just a true outside corner, something that we haven't had. He's going to be great in coverage. His movement is fluid. He can mirror receivers. He can read. He's got good ball tracking. He can read the quarterback, read the throws they're going to make. Good body control, just athletic, and then great size. Trying to cover these bigger wide receivers. So this is the home run slam dunk pick that if you're kind of iffy about the rest of them, this alone gives this draft an A for me.
Yeah, for sure. And before I give my thoughts and go to Aaron Van Buren's video, I want to just speak to something that you mentioned there. You talked about like the criticisms of Monty's being maybe a little too conservative, right? And our buddy Salty saying Monty's proven to be a great GM when it comes to drafting, free agents, etc., yet to be proven. Uh, I've been generally supportive of Monty's approach because I look at it from this larger big picture of how I think roster building should happen. And in terms of not overpaying in free agency, finding the right fits, but focusing on the draft. And in the first year of the rebuild, letting those young players play. And, in the second year, maybe a little more free agency. Now, third year, a little more free agency, but still being measured. But Mina Kimes, and I think Ben Solak, I think it was a guest on her podcast, was talking about the drafts they liked. And they mentioned the Cardinals as a team. They liked what they did. And they made a really interesting point, because you talked about that kind of conservative approach, but now he's taken some shots. And I think that's by design, because obviously I love the draft. I really get into it. And what we've talked about is like Monty's first two drafts, he hit on a high percent of players who are contributors, right? Paris Johnson Jr., Dante Stills, right? Owen Papo, maybe not a starter, but he's contributing on special teams and he's playing here, there, and he's still on the roster, which compared to, time is a big deal, right? Michael Wilson, Garrett Williams, like he's just player after player in those first two draft classes, it's contributing. But one of the things people said is, but he hasn't hit with a star. Okay, you could argue. I think Garrett Williams has become one of the top nickel corners, but he's not a household name. Marvin Harrison Jr. hopefully will be that, but he's not that yet, right? Paris Johnson Jr. is giving us just this really solid left tackle of the future who's just going to be a stalwart there, but he's not a Pro Bowler yet, right? So he hasn't hit on that like star player in the draft. But now that I look at one of the things that Mina Kimes and Ben Solak said is like that the Cardinals have put themselves in a position with what they've done to build the roster between previous drafts and free agency with the guys they brought in like Tomlinson and Calais and Josh Sweat, that now they don't need to worry about just getting competent players. They can take shots at high risk, high reward players because they've built the roster with a foundation of solid players, right? Young players that are developing. So like now that they've done that, they can take a shot at a guy like Will Johnson, who you do work, is he going to have a second contract because of the injury? If he doesn't, but if he does end up being okay, then you've got a potential like Pro Bowl quarterback, right? And same with any questions about Walter Nolan. So I actually have to wonder if Monty isn't playing a little 3D chess where it's like first 2 years conservative, get solid players, don't necessarily go with super risky guys, but just go to build a roster of contributing guys. And now that they've got the good foundation, take a few shots, right? Yeah. I wonder if that's just not intentional. So maybe I'm giving him more credit than he should, but it just feels like maybe that was intentional. I don't know. What do you think?
I think so. And he did, I forgot where I saw it, but I guess he did get some calls in the second round and then third round to, maybe trade back. It's like, nope, I know who I want. They're right here. I'm going to take this shot because if this, yields fruit, I look like the biggest genius this organization's ever seen.
Yeah, for sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up our good buddy Aaron Van Buren's video to talk about the pick, and then I'll get into my thoughts on the player. I know we talked a little bit generally about the strategy, but let's talk more about the player as we bring and reacting to Will Johnson pick. All right, here's Aaron Van Buren's thoughts on that.
Then we go to day 2. Now, day 2 was the windiest and rainiest day that I can remember in some time. Classic Wisconsin spring day. So not a lot of people were there, but as one of the few Cardinals fans that were there on day 2, I remember almost jumping straight up into the sky when we got Will Johnson because I knew he was on the board and I was just like, okay, he's there, but are we truly going to do it? And they did. It turns out that Will Johnson was pretty pissed off that he fell that far because of the medical allegations and people thinking he's not as good as he, once was, to quote Toby Keith. But I think that Will Johnson is a slam dunk pick. Once again, the first 2 picks, I was on cloud 9, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Will Johnson, and might even be my next Cardinals jersey after Trey McBride.
Wow. So I guess he liked that pick, huh? Um, so from my perspective, kind of looking at the pick, right? I'm also really high on the player. Like I and I sorry, having a little here. I liked him when I coming into the draft. He was a player who I felt like um this was a player that that I wouldn't mind if they took, right, when
Mhm.
we're in the first round. And then obviously they took him uh, in the second round, which was a major coup. So here's a couple other things though about Will Johnson. I mean, the elite talent from a national champion program, great player, but also like one of the things people talk about with cornerbacks in particular is scheme fit is very important for cornerback. Like it matters a lot. You've got to be in the right scheme. And what the Cardinals do is a lot of zone. And this is a zone quarterback. His weaknesses have to do with maybe some of the some things that are more oriented towards man heavy schemes. But in this zone, he is a slam dunk pick. So I think that's another thing to take into account, right? So um and yeah, it's there's the risk of will the injury kind of come back or not? And I'm willing to take that risk right now, right? So I
Yeah.
really love the pick from that perspective. A couple comments from people in the chat. Uh, you know, I know like Paul loves it, right? Loves this pick. Agent 47 can't believe let him fall to us. Um, Mazaki Felix, who doesn't like the Nolan pick, thinks this has saved the draft. So he loves this pick enough that he felt like it saved it. Jake Orderly thought that maybe we're going to go with a different quarterback like Trey Amos or an edge, Will Scorton. And I wondered if they would go Trey Amos because of the injury concern, right? That would
Mhm.
be the safer pick injury wise, but clearly loved him. Um, Right. And yeah, and Agent 47 saying in terms of the slide, it's the fit as well, right? There are some teams that wouldn't take him because of fit. So maybe, that's part of it, right? And then, as I talk about he's a zone quarterback, not the fastest guy, but that fits our system. Brian Abdallah saying, Will Johnson makes it feel like we had 2 first round picks like last year, right? Um, for sure. And then Paul saying, AVB said that he wasn't sold on Melton. I'm not so sure either of us, but he did get much better as the season progressed. And here's the thing. Melton now doesn't have to be cornerback one. That takes some
Mhm.
pressure off him, right? That gives him a little room, right, to develop into a cornerback two. There's some other comments. I won't get to all of them, but I do, I generally like this pick a lot. I think it's a great fit, obviously, and excited to see what he becomes. So then we move on to the next pick, Jordan Burch in the third round. Okay, Jordan Burch, an edge rusher out of Oregon. You see his PFF grades, decent grades. He's a little better against the pass than the rush in terms of his grades. Had 10 sacks last year, only 3 the year before, so he really came on. Um, but this is a guy who's big. He's, in fact, I do for him have his RAS. Like he's 6'4". Some reports had places
I
had
saw
him
six
taller.
six.
Huh?
I've seen 6'6". I
I
have
have
in
two.
my notes.
I've seen 6'6" as well, but I think RAS gets their stuff from the combine
Oh, okay.
typically. So and someone correct me if I'm wrong, I'm typically gonna go with RAS stuff because they measure them there pretty meticulously. But he's saw a really great 40-yard dash for as big as was 4.67, right? They don't have all the metrics in here, but a solid athlete, good pass rusher. So Jordan Burch was the edge rusher in the third round. Obviously they're trying to address the defense across the board and adding another pass rusher. There were some other guys on the board that I might have thought they would have gone with. I hadn't really looked at Jordan Burch, but like at the same time, it's one of those things where I'm going to trust that they have a reason for this guy versus other guys. But what were your thoughts on the Jordan Burch pick?
We need an edge, although I've kind of thought about it as well. We're not very like edge heavy. We bring a lot of pressure from the interior. So it's not like we needed to get one with the first pick or a first round pick. But I was listening to Monty talking about Jordan. He really liked his size and his length. So yeah, I did look up his size. They have him at 6'6", but who knows. But he did run a 4.6 at the combine. So he's got some speed. Monty says he does some stuff at Oregon that we do here, so the transition will be pretty seamless, I feel. But what's interesting was that his low snap count year yielded his highest production, which was last year, 8.5 sacks, 11 tackles for losses, forced fumble with a recovery. So he's got a lot of upside. He's pretty versatile. So I'm excited to see what he does in this defense.
Yeah, for sure. And with the way they've built this roster, he doesn't need to come out and be the guy right
Right.
away, right?
Yeah.
He's in fact they have time to develop him, right? So it feels very much like they're looking to develop those traits, right? But he's strong. He's got some decent speed for his size. He's big, right? And that allows him to be versatile to play maybe a little bit of three technique, on and then move outside, so they can maybe do if he's not so small that they have to worry about him being a mismatch, against the run. So there's some interesting things there with this pick. Real quick, say hey to a couple folks that jumped in. We got Lance, our longtime friend here. Thanks for being here, Lance. I appreciate you. I think he said, "Oh yeah, gentlemen, Joe, love the draft. Only wish we took Nash in round 7, the receiver Nash, right?" And then he says, "And lady, sorry, Jackie."
It's
Also,
okay.
appreciate you being here, my friend. So there's a couple other comments. Maybe he grew since the combine. Yeah,
Who knows?
yeah. But Jordan Burch in that D Rob mold, right? Darius Robinson, right? Is kind of that size, right? A little bit. I think Robinson's a little bigger. Um, Robert Moore thinks that Princely was the pick until Carolina traded up right in front of us and took him. Can't wait to play Carolina for some revenge. Mizaki saying Burch feels more like a defensive tackle than a pass edge. Like size wise, you would think that, but like he was announced as an edge, and I keep hearing and reading that they plan to play him at edge. It just has a bigger edge. We'll see though, right? But the man has power, has one hell of a bull rush. Jacob Williams saying the D line is so crowded and I love it, right? Getting some more bodies in there to compete, right? See who ends up being the starter. Dana saying RS uses combine when available or pro day official times when not. Okay, yep. Robert Moore saying, as for Burch, extremely athletic for his size, swats the ball like JJ Swat, right? So, but he is that sort of a little bit bigger edge, which I very much like. Now, I think Aaron, his video, he's talking about the rest of the draft. So what I'll do is we're going to real quick play Aaron's video for his reactions to rounds 3 through 7, and then we can kind of go from there and get the rest of our thoughts on the rest of the picks. So here we go, and add it, and there we go. Okay.
As for the rest of the draft, from round 3 and on, I kind of felt like rounds 3
You
and 4
can't
were
hear
just
the
kind of like
audio.
out of nowhere picks.
No.
Okay, can't hear the audio that time. Let me try it again. We'll try it one more time. Chrome tab, reacting. All right, let's see if we can hear it.
As for the rest of the draft, from round 3 and on, I kind of felt
everybody else
like
could hear it, I
rounds
guess. So
3 and
don't listen
4
to
were
me.
just kind of like out of nowhere picks. I think they just kind of settled for Jordan Burch and Cody Simon. Now, of course, I was hoping for, like a lot of people, Scadaboo and Jack Sawyer, call me whatever. But at least Cody Simon has a little bit more of a track record. I don't know anything about Jordan Burch, and I just got back today from traveling, so I have not been able to watch anything at all on him, so that is to be determined. And then finally, moving on to the last 3 picks, Denzel Burke, Hayden Connor, and Kitan Crawford. I'm not sure how you say that. I think the fact that we drafted another corner that late means somebody else of one of the main starters is getting cut. Whether it's Sean Murphy-Bunting or some of the other guys who were hurt and didn't even play last year, those guys are definitely on the hook. And then I also think if nobody else goes, then Max Melton could be on the hot seat because I just don't think his play was that good. And yes, SMB got a lot better in the second half of the year, but he was a reason that we got into off to such a bad start to begin with. So if you will see what those guys do in camp and preseason, but overall, if I had to give this draft a grade, I give it a solid B. It was a very good draft. We just needed to raise the floor, and I believe this draft did that. And there's real excitement here coming up for 2025 for the Arizona Cardinals.
Awesome. Now, Aaron Van Buren is not easy to please. He is a tough critic, and I love Aaron for that. So a B for Aaron is probably like an A for
everybody else.
Yeah. So much love for Aaron, though he's one of my favorite people. But yeah, all right. So let's I'll bring back up the slides, and now we can just leave that there. I don't have to maneuver back and forth, and there we go. Okay. So he overall likes the draft. So Jordan Burch, again, I like I do, now that I look at it, I do like the pick, and I just I think with what Monty or what JG wants to do, I do think um he likes some of those bigger edge rushers that give them some versatility that they can move around. So we'll see. But I think this is an interesting pick for that reason. Let me get some of the comments and say hey to some of the folks in the chat, and we'll go on to some of the other picks as well. Let's see. Russ saying we have a couple fifth-year players who those are more help now guys than rookies you have to bring along. I think that's why they drafted a couple of them. Maybe not stars this year, but good backups, much easier to coach and prepare and play meaningful minutes. Let's see. Agent 47 saying it will be a dogfight in training camp. The DL room is stacked with talent now. Right. Paul G saying Commanders had Burch on their radar, so that's good to know. Okay. Let's see. Oh, we got Brian. Thanks for being here, Brian. Appreciate you. Joe, good to see you, dude. Hope you're doing well. This draft was amazing. I'm doing well. It's so good to see you. Thanks for being here with us. Dana saying the NFC West seems to be moving toward stop the run first mentality with their edge rushers in general. Niners, Mikael Williams, for example. Yeah, so you kind of getting those bigger edge rushers fits that. Jake Worley wasn't a fan of Sawyer with those with his short arms, right? So not that low on missing out, right? He seemed like a high floor, low ceiling player, Jack Sawyer. But Jake Worley was saying Kitan Crawford. Okay. Let's see, a couple other folks. I think we got some folks that just jumped in. Let's see. Julian Garcia, thanks for being hanging out with us. Max is solid. Let's see. I think. Let's see. Is there anyone else that I missed? Clark and I mean, if Keitrell Clark, I'd be worried about my job if I were him. Right? I liked him coming out in the draft, right? And Sean Murphy Bunting, right? Let's see. Corey Cards, what is up, my friend? Appreciate you being here from the Cardinalatics. They've got a podcast. I can't pronounce it. It's a good podcast. Cardalytics. There you go. I appreciate you being here, my friend. Let's see. And then we've got Kyler Burch saying, just got to say 3 out of those 7 draft picks have national championships under the belt. That's a good point, right? And then Robert Moore saying, I think Cody Simon is a potential diamond in the rough. His tape is very good, very athletic, extremely fast, and has very high football IQ. All right, so yeah. So let's talk about some of these next picks. We looked at Jordan Burch. So now we have Cody Simon, 4th round pick, linebacker out of Ohio State. Right, graded really well, 87.7 last year, and throughout his college career has graded solid, right? And again, Ohio does not play, against tier 3 college, like they play good college teams, right? So solid inside linebacker. We look at his RAS, right? It's solid. It's not elite, but it's good, right? His 40 time was good. Overall, solid player though, right? So, what were your thoughts on Cody Simon?
Once you start to get in these later rounds, you kind of have to do your homework on these guys. And after just kind of doing my homework on him, it's almost like, how did he fall that low? But great value for us because he's probably going to be starting opposite of Max. But he's got he's got a championship pedigree. He was the Natty and the Rose Bowl MVP. Monty said that he really took a step this year, and that's kind of what the the scouting report said that he was kind of a late bloomer, but he was a green dot player. He communicates effectively. He brings a lot of intangibles to the position. A high football IQ guy. Team captain over there at Ohio. He was good in coverage, and you know, I think this is a very like outside of the Will Johnson pick. This is probably my favorite pick.
Yeah. I had been um, all throughout this process saying Cardinals linebacker day two. I'm big. I think you get such really good value in linebacker on day two. You find really good players. They waited a little longer than I would have thought, right to the top of
Mhm.
day three. And there were some other names out there like Chris Paul Jr. I really liked, right? So Cody Simon was not on my radar, but as always, as I've looked into him more, I like him more, and it's just Monty knows what he's doing. Um, like his limitations have to do with like arm length and maybe not having elite athleticism, but he has good enough athleticism. But his strengths are the kinds of things you look for in terms of the green dot, like high football IQ, good processing, right? Sheds blocks well, right? Slippery in terms of getting off blocks. And so, like, when you look at this, like, they needed a guy to become the future green dot, right? The quarterback of the defense. And this feels like that guy, like the things you want for a guy to be the green dot that calls your plays on defense or is that makes those adjustments. He has those traits, right? He's maybe not the athletic freak that Owen Pappo was, right? Owen Pappo, his book on him coming out of college was super, super athletic, but not as instinctive in terms of the football reaction as a linebacker,
We've
right?
seen that on tape.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
But Cody Simon, not as athletic as someone like Owen Pappo, but athletic enough to play the position in the NFL
yeah,
and really good processing. So like the more I've looked into him, the more I'm like, yeah, I see this. This is that guy who 3 years from now we're going to be like, this is that the quarterback of the defense. He may not be the most athletic player on our defense, but he doesn't need to be because we've put guys around him and he's keeping the thing together, right?
right.
So this was a position they needed to address, in my opinion. They needed to get a starting inside linebacker of the future to go along with, next to Mac Wilson, right? So I really like it a lot now that I've looked at it. In terms of some of the comments we've got here, let's see. Agent 47 like this one might be our starter. Let's see. We've got Jake Worley saying Cody Simon didn't have the measurables teams want for linebacker. I think, and someone said like the height, the size was he was prototype, but I think the measurables is probably some of the athleticism stuff, maybe. But Robert Moore saying he's a tackling machine, right? Dana saying I was focused more on coverage heavy linebackers because Mac Wilson to me took a lot of the line of scrimmage role. But again, I think the NFC West is moving towards controlling that line of scrimmage, right? Let's see. A couple other comments in here. Simon looks like Jordan Hicks, former linebacker, or maybe, right? Paul saying you can get a good linebacker in the fifth. Cardinals picked Eric Williams in the fifth. Yeah, you can get good linebackers throughout the draft, but I do think when you go in the middle, second, third round, you get potentially Pro Bowl guys in those rounds. Fourth round, you can get solid starters. You can find a lot of good linebackers in the third round, though. Corey Card saying, honestly, it could work out for us how Kevin Minter did back then. Let's see. Brian saying he can't unsee the Jordan Hicks thing now. Thanks, Lance. Let's see. Fort Chubb, thanks for being here. All eyes on Cody for Cam Scadoo fans. Yeah, I mean, that's, fans who wanted Cam are going to be like, this will be the guy they compare, right? I didn't want us to take Cam.
Neither did I.
I think he's solid. I like him. I want him to be good, but I just didn't. I didn't.
Can't justify taking a running back after taking a running back and resigning James Conner. But
Yeah.
he's in a good position to succeed with the
Yeah.
Giants. So if you like him as a player, then this is where you want him to go because he would have been kind of irrelevant here.
Yeah. Mizaki wanted Danny Sussman from OU, but he went 3 picks before us, right? Yeah, Eric Williams, eighth round linebacker, back when they had that many rounds, right? Yeah. Um, it's a different game, a different day though. But yeah, so I really like this pick. It's a position we needed, a smart player. And if he becomes that starter for us, man, that what a pick. So next up we have uh, Denzel Burke, the cornerback in the fifth round, also out of Ohio State. Monty loves his Ohio State players. You see his grades here. They're solid. Looking at his RAS, he didn't do everything, but the things he did are it just listed as good. 4.48, 40-yard dash. He's not elite. He's a little bit smaller, 5'11", 186. Again, he didn't do everything, but this is a zone cornerback, and those guys aren't always going to be the fastest, right? So, but what are your thoughts on Denzel Burke, the pick, and what he means for the Cardinals?
Initially it was a little bit of a head scratcher because, like I said about Will Johnson, our our CB room wasn't in dire need, but if you want to bolster it, you do it where you can get great talent. And then to double down again in the draft. It was pretty interesting, but we did trade down with the Cowboys. We moved down 22 spots. So I think this is probably just a matter of, best player available. I think people here were wanting maybe a wide receiver, but it's like, do you take a wide receiver that's probably going to be a practice squad guy, or do you take a corner for some good competition? Because there's some question marks in our corner room. So, if you give like a guy like Keytrail who, you know, rarely saw the field last season, kind of fell off the face of the earth, maybe you get him some competition to see if he gets a roster spot. Why not? He's got a pretty good upside. He's physical. He'll hit, Burke will hit somebody, and if you're clamoring for Cam Scatabo being a local kid, and even though he's from California, then you might want to root for Denzel Burke because he's actually from Arizona.
Yeah, Phoenix kid. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's get some of the comments on Burke. Jake Worley, this is the one I was met on. Brian Abdallah saying, did not like this pick, but the 2023 tape and numbers were much better, right? You look, he had an 80.2 grade in 2023, 73.3 last year. Let's see, we've got Drake Worley saying they took BPA, best player available, but wasn't sure if the trade down the fifth round was worth it. Dana, this guy, he was a guy that got a lot of buzz in 2023, but did not have a good 2024. Some of his weaknesses showed up on films. Mizaki thinking they can move him to safety, maybe. I don't. Well, that'd be interesting to see. Brian saying Burke was a first round pick if he was in the draft in 23. He regressed that year, but they also changed the system on him. Agent 47 saying he was a second round pick, but in talent 24, but the stayed for 1 more year, and this hurt him. The Oregon tape was awful for him. Man got burned. For Chubb thinks he's awesome. Lansing's, I think Burke is a great addition so late. He played so much ball, many more snaps against high-ranked talent that's come through Ohio State. Just think of all the wide receivers they have to come out of OSU. So this was probably the first one that I was like, was a little bit of a head scratcher for me in terms of, man, how many cornerback, like this cornerback room is like the Hunger Games.
Mm-hmm.
Like who's going to survive, right? And they can't keep all the guys they've drafted, right, on this roster. Some of them they can get to the practice squad, right? But like you typically you only can, most teams will have 4 to 5 cornerbacks on their roster, right? And maybe they go a little heavier than that, but you just, even at that though, right, like Johnson, Melton, whether you like Melton or not, he's going to make the team. I can't imagine why he wouldn't, right? Garrett Williams is a lock, right? And now that's 3, right? So you've got typically room for 2 more, right? Sean Murphy Bunting. I know people don't like him, but they might move on from him, but he's a guy they paid. You've got Denzel Burke. You've got guys that they drafted last year, right? Guy in the third round didn't even play, right? There's just and Keytrail Clark and Starling Thomas, and not that those guys have done enough to deserve to be untouchable, but it's going to be tough, right? And Brian saying Melton, Johnson, Burke, Williams, Jones are for sure keepers, right? That seems like, right? So this is a guy that might end up being on the practice squad, right? Yeah. 12 cornerbacks on the roster currently and 18 DBs with the safeties. So that for that reason, it was a head scratcher. If we didn't have all those cornerbacks, I get the pick. Like he's a scheme fit. He's a zone cornerback, right? And what people are talking about here is, he played better a couple years ago, had a rough year, system scheme change. There, you can talk yourself into, let's take a shot on this guy. It's a late pick. Let's take a shot on him, right? So I get that, but just the numbers is maybe the bigger reason why it's a question mark. If with the numbers, that makes it harder. But people saying G is a yeah, Monty Gannon and Monty obsessed with cornerbacks, and I will say there I do kind of get the approach because okay, JG has defensive backs is his forte,
Right.
and I think maybe what they're trying to do is just take as many bites from the apple as possible and find the guys the cream that's going to rise to the top, right? Who survives the Hunger Games in the cornerback room, and whoever does are going to be good. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. What
It's
do
a
you
good
think?
problem to have an
Mhm.
oversaturated room because you're getting the best of the best that you have available to you.
Yeah, 100%. So I think it's going to be interesting. There's going to be some of these cornerbacks that we like who are probably going to be on the practice squad for them, right? And
Yeah.
Burke might be that one of those guys. We'll see. So I get the pick in terms of the fit. I just with the numbers, it's like okay, but like he fits the system. So we'll see what happens in a Phoenix kid. So you like that, right?
Hmm.
The next pick we'll go past his RAS again. Now the next pick was Hayden Connor, the guard. He did not have a PFF card like this. He wasn't on their big board,
No,
so
no.
that tells you something. But one of the things I've talked about in the past with the kind of the Monty the chart, right? The almighty chart is they take interior offensive linemen third, fourth, fifth round, right? So I thought they would take one on day 3. I thought maybe they take one in the 4th round, but they took him later than that. And Hayden Connor is, interesting. He played guard. You see his grades, last year, decent. He's much better pass blocker, 85.4, right? 82.2. So he's much better pass blocker. Run blocking, not as good. A lot of people have talked about this. Last year, allowed 0 sacks, right? So that's nice. Full-time starter didn't allow any sacks. So that's nice, right? But, the athleticism is, here we have his RAS. It's good, but not elite, right? So he's reasonably athletic. Okay. He's not the kind of athlete though that you're like, oh man, this guy's so athletic, we're going to take a shot on him. He's athletic enough, but has some limitations, especially in the run game. So what are your thoughts about Hayden Connor, the guard that we took out of Texas?
Yeah, that's sort of intrigued me a lot because, like you said, you would think that we would have addressed the guard position earlier in the draft. That was kind of the general consensus. But this was a pick. This is what it was a pick that we got that Cowboys trade back. So we were able to take him. Listening to Monty talk about him, he likes him a lot. He thinks he flew under the radar. He's a tough, strong lineman. Um, he's blocked some notable players. If anybody would like to have some fun, go look at his tape against Mason Graham and Kenneth Walker. It's not, he played at Texas, so he's seen some real competition. It's not like a kid from a small school. So I like it if it pans out, if he makes the roster. I think that'll be a good depth pickup. And, not the most athletic, but like you said, like, he allowed 0 sacks, 2 QB hits, and he's versatile. He can play anywhere on the line. So you can get a guy that can play that you can move around in a pinch if needed, and you get him in the 6th round, win-win.
Right, right. So a couple comments from the chat. He was all right. Hayden Connor, right? Okay, Jake Worley. Calvin, appreciate you. Long time supporter of the channel. Appreciate you, my friend, being here. In my opinion, it was a safe draft. Agent 47 now warranting no man's land at this point in the draft, right? let's see. Dana's saying he's played all three interior positions on short notice. That versatility is nice, right? Uh, 43 starts at Texas, played all five positions. Um, Paul saying Monty said he liked Hayden Connor because he noticed the competition. He had both in the SEC and his own team in practice. Okay, he has center experience, versatility. So versatility is the big word here, right? That a lot of people are talking about. So like this, when they picked him, again, it did kind of, it was another head scratcher, and maybe this is just my bias because he wasn't on PFF's big board, and that is not a be all end all, right?
Right.
But at this point in the draft, you're taking shots on offensive linemen that you think you might be able to develop, whether traits, guys, or things like this. And so, like, while I was not excited about the player, here's one thing I know. I'm like, Monty comes from the New England system. We've talked about this before. And when I did a couple of videos about Monty, when they hired him and the offensive line and the draft, where that draft chart came from, one of the things I did is I looked at the draft history of the Patriots, and something that stood out is that they just had a good history of finding interior offensive linemen on day three and even undrafted free agents. I mean, they had their misses too, but they would draft guys, and like later that would become solid players. So I just feel like their system, they know what they're doing when it comes to looking for those guys later. Like Yelda Froholt was drafted by New England in the fourth round, right? And guys like that. So I'm just going to trust Monty knows what he's doing, that he's going to take shots on interior offensive linemen on day three. They won't all hit, but he's going to keep doing it, and they're going to hit some of them. And so this guy, maybe he's just a versatile depth guy. Maybe he's just a practice squad guy for now. But at this late point in the draft, right, sixth round, and he played it against good competition. There's other guys he could have taken that were still on the board. Monty picked this guy. I'm going to trust that he had a reason, right?
Right.
So will this guy make the team? I don't know. Will he be anything in the league? I don't know. He seems maybe he'll just be a backup with versatility. Maybe he'll surprise us all, be a starter. But I'm going to trust that Monty knows what he's looking for when it comes to offensive linemen based on where he came from. So we'll see, right? So then we have Kitan Crawford, okay, or Kitan Crawford, the safety out of Nevada, he was with Texas for 4 years and transferred because he wasn't playing. Graded, really well, right? 81.1 again, though, against lower levels of competition, granted, right? Air Force posted a 78.3 against Air Force, right? 85.7 against Southern Methodist University in Texas, SMU, right? So not playing in the SEC, right? Graded well, but is really athletic. He's a little short, 5'10", but he's super athletic, right? What were your thoughts on this pick?
Well, I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I don't have a lot of notes on this pick. It's our last pick of this draft, but I did put down project slash special teamer because we will have to think and address at some point in life after Buda Baker what we're gonna do with Jalen Thompson. Will Rabbit take a leap this year? It's not a for certain that what he's gonna be doing this year. So yeah, if you want to just throw up a special team or safety, you know, I'm all in. Um, and that, special teams is very underrated. You want guys that are, athletic and AZ Esports Cards, that's my boyfriend. So we've talked about this draft. He's in the next room.
Yeah, yeah,
um, you know, we both agree that in these later rounds of the draft, you're just taking just raw athletic freaks and hope that you can develop them into being a football player. So I that's what that pick is for me. Um, so I don't hate it. But like I said, you're good teams draft for the future. So if it pans out that you know, you're going from special teams to maybe getting in rotation as a starter, you know, I don't hate it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, like I had been saying for a while that I felt like safety was on the table. Like a lot of people, because Buddha and Jalen and Rabbit, a lot of people, did not think safety would be a position we'd pick. And Kyler Bird was also with me on that, and he took a lot of heat. He said, he took a lot of heat on social media for whenever he would take safeties. But I kept thinking, Jalen Thompson, last year of his contract, I love Jalen Thompson. I think he's a good player. I just don't know that they're bringing him back. It's not a position you want to have tons of money invested in terms of big contracts. They've got two guys with big contracts. I know they've got cap room, but you want that cap room to extend guys like they just did with Trey, and they're going to be doing with PJJ, Paris Johnson Jr. and other guys, right? And you don't want tons of money tied up in your starting safeties. You want to have like maybe one guy you pay and then kind of rotate in some guys that you're developing. So I felt like safety was very much in play. I thought maybe they'd go earlier, but this player does profile more as special teams and maybe practice squad candidate, right? Highly athletic, but not looking at him to be a guy that is a starter anytime soon, if ever. But that athleticism, I think they're bringing him in to be a special teams demon, right?
Right.
And I read somewhere, I forget where, that somewhat after Monty drafted him, he got multiple texts from people, which is a good sign. That's usually meaning other GMs like, oh man, you got that guy.
You got my guy.
Yeah, right. So I feel like this is a guy that was, even though I hadn't heard of him, I think he was probably on a lot of teams' radars as a guy who is going to be a special teams ace potentially. So I think that's what you're looking at with him, a guy who's going to be a highly athletic special teamer that maybe you can develop him into a depth piece, but even if you don't, those special teams guys are valuable.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that, pick in particular. Let me get some of the comments, and we'll talk maybe quickly or briefly about some of the undrafted free agents. Let's see, special teams if he makes the three, right? Let's see. Corey says, I give this draft an A++ only because Keim didn't control it. Right. We're so glad not to have Steve Keim making those picks anymore. Brian saying it's an A draft just based on the value they got. The rest is to be determined. Lance would have liked us to take the receiver Nash, right? David saying Walter Nolan would be the key anchor to achieve a coveted 4-4 tie. Yes, David here has been talking about, commenting on my videos for a long time, that he's waiting for that 4-4 tie, and Walter Nolan is going to be the key piece for that. Listen, one of these days it's going to happen, my friend. One of these days. I did forget, I had some stuff here real quick to talk about. Some of the UDFA, so I will add that real quick. And there's Jackie. Oh, there we go. Hey, hello. Whoa, hey there. All right. Okay. So give me a second. There we go. Okay. So as of at least the time I was prepping for this, there were 6 undrafted free agents they had signed. We'll see if more come down the pipeline, right? Wide receiver Bryson Green from Wisconsin, tight end Oscar Cardenas from UT San Antonio, tackle Jeremiah Byers from Florida State, tackle Josh Fryer from Ohio State, tackle Valentin Sen from Connecticut, and defensive interior lineman Elijah Simmons from Tennessee. So what I did is I just, where possible, I grabbed the RAS scores. It's really all we had to go with for most of these guys. They didn't have, they weren't in the big board in PFF. So not all of them had, some of them didn't have anything, and some of them only had partial. But Bryson Green, wide receiver, very athletic, right? 6 foot, 211 pounds. Though, like, he's not like elite burner speed 4.54, but very athletic in terms of some of the other things like vertical and broad, the 20-yard split. So, not 9.37 RAS, so it's solid. Maybe some areas not as high, but this guy would be interesting to see what they're going to do with him, or we'll see if he even makes.
The team.
Right.
Hmm.
But they needed they. There are a lot of people who felt like they should have taken a receiver. They didn't. They got a UDFA, but we'll see. Um, the tight end there wasn't anything for him, but Jeremiah Byers, offensive guard, Florida State University, okay, like good, but not elite athleticism, right? 6'4", 314, so 7.92 RAS. So this is a guy that see what he has to offer. Joshua Fryer, better athletic, 9.20. He's a little bit as a tackle. He's 6'4", almost 6'5", little, which is fine. He's not tall, but you could maybe see him at guard. But he does have the nice arm length of 34, almost 35 inches, which for tackle you want that. So good athleticism there. We'll see if Valentin Sen, another guy now. He's pretty athletic, right? 6'6", 305. Offensive tackle, 33.5-inch arms, so long enough arms to stay at tackle potentially, right? And then Elijah Simmons. This guy, his RAS isn't good. This is, but you look at me, he's 6'1", 334. This is a nose tackle, so he's not fast. This is a guy you plug in the middle and say, "I dare you to run through me."
Yeah, at the traffic cone.
Traffic cone. Exactly. Though he has a good vertical, right? So maybe there's a little explosiveness, even though he's not
Yeah,
super fast.
just a jump in the air. Why not?
Yeah. So so listen, we're not going to spend a lot of time on those guys because again, we don't even know if they're going to end up being on this team. But they did pick up a few UDFAs, right? So before we get out of here, Jackie, any final thoughts on the draft?
Well, I think a big thing that I wanted to emphasize what makes Monty Austin Fort stand out from a Steve Keim is that most of our picks came from top programs.
Mhm.
Ohio State, Michigan. This isn't your mom and pop school out in the sticks that Steve Keim liked to pick from. These are quality players that saw real competition. And, that's the closest that they're going to get to NFL level talent. So I like that we pick from big schools, big programs. PFF gave us an A+. They only awarded 3 teams A+, us, the Cowboys, and I want to say the Panthers. I forgot. But yeah, the general consensus from every big analyst has been A or B+ at best. So we really addressed a lot of concerns. We didn't really leave anything on the table. Between this and free agency, everybody saw 4 months of terrible defense. Guys that are starters that wouldn't make anybody's 53-man roster are out, trying to do the best that they can. So now we've got some good competition. We've got some good depth pieces. Everybody kind of thought maybe we'd go wide receiver at some point, but I feel like the talent drop off was significant after like the third round. So if you weren't going to take a wide receiver then you're not really missing out on anybody special. And I think we're pretty set, and I think it's a matter of you've given Kyler the tools, and it's kind of on you to work with what you got. Him and not just Kyler Murray, but Drew Petzing as a coordinator. He's not the hasn't really schemed up a nice passing attack yet. So I don't know if you can really justify trying to take like a little burner wide receiver. But I'm very satisfied. I feel like this is going to be a top 10 defense in the NFL. Um, and we're not just drafting to save our season this year. We're drafting for the future, and that's what good franchises do. As much as I don't like to praise the Eagles organization, that's kind of a Howie Roseman thing. You took a swing on Will Johnson, and I feel like it's going to pay dividends. And we got guys in free agency, and I feel like we are ready to roll. So if anybody came into to the draft with any doubts about Monty Fort, I think you owe that man an apology.
Okay, for sure. Yeah, I really like the draft. I love picks 1 through 4. The last couple picks, I'm trusting Monty. Maybe I had some question marks about those picks, or maybe it's more there were other guys still available that I liked more. But Monty knows what he's doing, and I'm trusting him with the draft. And Yeah, I love that that it feels like there's a plan, that they're grown-ups in the building. They're taking premier positions early, premium positions early, and non-premium positions late. They've got like the offense didn't live up to where we wanted them to necessarily, but they've got the pieces on offense. Like they don't. You could say maybe they could use another offensive lineman or another receiver, but like if with all the players they have, and especially the type of offense they're going to be that's run heavy, they don't need like a bunch of wide receivers. They could use maybe another speed guy, but like they've got enough to have a good offense. But
Mm-hmm.
they needed the pieces. They were coaching up the defense and they needed more pieces. And they did that this offseason between free agency and now the draft. I really like where they're going, and I think a top 10 defense. I'm not going to predict that yet. They got to prove it, but they've got the pieces to do that, right? The pieces are there. Maybe they need another year to let some of those young guys develop before they're there. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I could absolutely see it this year. It wouldn't shock me as well as they coached them up last year with what they had to work with. And now they've got a lot better players to work with. So it's just, I continue to be impressed with what Monty's doing. And it's not just homerism. It's like, objectively speaking, there are these philosophies of roster building that I subscribe to, and he's hitting most of them pretty much dead on in terms of how you hit free agency, how you hit the draft. And this draft is yet another example of that. So I'm really excited about it. I'm excited to see these players, see what they do. I think this defense is going to be that much better this year. And if the offense just can get even a little more consistency, like, listen, if the defense is much better, is improved, and the offense even is just like it was last year, this is still a low-end playoff team. If the offense can take a step forward and the defense gets better, this could be the year they really make a push, right, to be that at that next level. So we'll see, but I am excited. I want to thank everyone for hanging out with us. And yeah, Russ saying everyone hit the like button, right? Please make sure you do that before you get out of here. I want to thank everyone. I didn't get all the comments, but I appreciate everyone who was here. I try to get at least one comment from everyone. I appreciate Jackie being here with us. It's so good to hang out with you again. I look forward to more of this as we get through into the
Yes.
season. But everyone, thanks for being with us. We're going to get out of here. And hey, this was only an hour and 12 minutes. It wasn't a 3-hour live stream like the Mock Draft Mondays. So thank you all for hanging out with us. We'll see you next time. Peace, everyone.